G'day. It's the 24th of February, 2023. It's Stefan Angelini here for another economic update. It's a Friday. It's 30 degrees outside, but I'm still wearing a shirt. How professional am I? What are we talking about today? We're talking about wages growth and the effect that's having on the economy potentially, iron ore in China. We'll talk about traveling news, so who's traveling where. We're going to talk about the F45 closures and how you can potentially pick up some really cheap gym equipment. Talk about artificial intelligence and what's happening in that space. We'll look at Russia's economy and the effect that all the lockdowns and shutdowns for them are having on their economy. And finally, we're going to talk about a new family and domestic violence payment that's come about. That's now, legislation for any employer with more than 15 people as of the 1st of February. Now, if you want to hear the full episode on this, go on over to our podcast or YouTube channel, Real Wealth with Stefan Angelini, and listen to the whole clip. And if you're going to, guess what? Here's a little disclaimer. Anything you hear is just general information. Please don't consider it as personal advice. And if you want personal advice, go and speak to a licensed financial planner. If you want some financial planners to work out your tax, super, and investment strategy, that's what we do. So go over to hello@angeladvisory.com.au. Thank you. All right, let's get into what we're actually talking about today. First off, we will start with wages growth. Wage growth in Australia did increase, but did not increase by too much, which means there's going to be good things for inflation and good news for potential interest rate hikes. So inflation in December went up from 3.1% to 3.3%. Wage growth went up from 3.1% to 3.3%, but inflation is still sitting at 7.8%. So from a real wage growth perspective, which is the real return, is if it was inflation was 7.8% and wage growth was 7.8%, then the real decrease would be zero. But in fact, the real decrease in wages is actually 4.5%. So because they're not keeping pace with inflation, it means that people's wages just aren't keeping up with expenses. So the Reserve Bank is going to look at that favorably, dependent on making their, indication of what they do with interest rates quite a bit more clear. So basically what they've said is that the RBA do monitor wage increases very closely. And if wages did increase by more than this, then that'd be a pretty good indicator that they'd be increasing interest rates. But this may have an effect on just how quickly they go if real wages do not start to increase a bit more. Let's talk about iron ore and profit. So Rio Tinto have had a big decline in their profit, mainly because the price of iron ore has decreased. Now, iron ore reached all-time highs during COVID because the likes of Brazil shut down, who's the second biggest exporter of iron ore. So Rio Tinto, BHP, Fortescue Metals had a great year and then pumped out massive dividends. So Rio Tinto's full-year profit dropped 41%. So for the 12 months to 31 December was only $18.1 billion, which means they've cut their dividend from a dollar perspective compared to last year. But the CEO is still positive. So he's quietly confident that China will be a stabilizing force in the current economy. And people don't realize that. They think the property market in China is in dire straits, but he actually believes that the property market is in quite a positive state. So with China coming back out, it's going to abate the effects of recessions around the world. And he's actually quite confident that the likes of US and Europe and the recessions over there, that there's less expectations of that because energy prices are getting a little bit better. So about travel and traveling, and Flight Centre has said that, well, people are traveling a lot. Everyone in the world is still traveling, even though the price of things are going up because inflation's going up. Everyone except for Asia. Now, with China coming out of lockdowns, Asia will start traveling again, and that's going to be a good news for Flight Centre in particular, but good news for travelers all over the world. So it just doesn't seem that inflation or increased rates are actually slowing people down, but there's a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of pent-up savings coming out of COVID. For all you gym junkies out there and lifters, if you remember way back when to COVID, it was very expensive to buy any home gym equipment for your place. But as of recent, if you know the gym membership F45, there's been a lot of them closing down recently. So you're going to see a flurry of gym equipment come onto things like Facebook Marketplace and eBay as people these companies try to offload some of their stocks. So let's look at actually what's happened to this F45 company. A lot of them have been going into liquidation recently. It started in September last year with one in Yeppoon in Queensland. Then the following month was one in Sunshine in Melbourne. In November, there was another one in Queensland and then one in Mount Barker in South Australia. So there's a few closing down. Most recently, F45 branches in Victoria's South Yarra and Port Melbourne have had wind-up applications in court by a small business loan service called BizCap. So what does that mean is that these companies will have to pay people back and they'll have to sell assets. Selling assets on a place like Facebook Marketplace might bring in money really quickly. So unfortunately, this massive franchise is not going too well. Artificial intelligence is the new big thing. They say that semiconductors are the new oil, and this is the new information technology or the new internet. So this is changing the way the world works. So ChatGPT is created by open artificial intelligence, or OpenAI. And now you might remember that Google brought out their artificial intelligence bot, and now Microsoft have brought out Bing, their chatbot, to see how that goes as a competitor. Now, a lot of these companies have been developing this artificial intelligence products since 2017, 2018. Now, the more data they get, the better they perform. So they're getting a lot more data, which means they're going to get a lot stronger. And if you're looking in 1 or 2 years' time, these things will be so powerful. So I guess the takeaway from this is that this will become a part of everyone's lives, the ChatGPT. And we're all already using artificial intelligence, even if you don't know it. But so it's just a really interesting space to watch, and it is part of what the future will look like. Let's go around the world. Let's look at Russia. As you know, Russia invaded the Ukraine. A lot of Western world said, oh, well, if that's the case, if you're not listening to us and you're still doing these things, we're going to put sanctions on you to try and cripple your economy. Now, Russia went okay, and they were actually surprisingly resilient. But over the last few months, it started to wane off a little bit. So initially, they replaced all the oil they were sending to Western countries with Asia, and they started sending a lot of oil to Asia. But now there's not as many people buying oil, not as many people buying gas, which is putting a real dampener on their economy. And obviously, and what's also happened is their ruble has gone down a lot compared to the US dollar. Now, what that means, it's normally really good for exporters. But they're not exporting anything because no one's buying it. So it's just making it harder for them to get things into the economy because it is a lot more expensive. So we'll see how that plays out, and just if there is enough pressure on the Russian economy to make Vladimir Putin have second thoughts. Finally, people suffering from family and domestic violence. There has now been legislation put into place that when you are an employer with more than 15 people, then you must give people 10 days of paid family and domestic violence leave as of 1 February 2023. So talk to your accountants about this, talk to your bookkeepers, and talk to any lawyers you know if you're suffering from this or if you're one of those employers. But just be aware that helping these people that are in these pretty shocking circumstances. Anyway, that's me for a Friday. Thank you very much for listening. Go off and have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao.